Jake Martinez shifted the worn leather straps of his grandfather's military backpack and tried not to wince as another round of alien laughter echoed through the Galactic Survival Academy briefing hall. The thing looked like it had survived 3 wars, which, knowing Grandpa Martinez, it probably had. "Is that thing held together with actual fabric?" Vexstar hissed, his reptilian scales shimmering with what Jake had learned was the Zephyrian equivalent of smug satisfaction. The 7-foot lizard's biosuit gleamed with embedded sensors, climate controls, and enough computing power to run a small space station. How delightfully primitive. Jake glanced around at his classmates' gear. Zara's crystalline form practically hummed with integrated technology, her translucent body crackling with energy readouts and environmental displays. Clicks buzzed overhead, his insectoid wings keeping him airborne while his compound eyes analyzed atmospheric data through his neural implants. Even the class sloth creature, Mumblix, had cybernetic enhancements grafting directly into his fur. "Oh, this old thing." Jake patted the backpack fondly, noting how the canvas had faded from olive drab to something resembling the color of old coffee stains. "Yeah, it's practically an antique. My grandfather used it back when humans had to survive without having a computer surgically attached to their brainstems." "How did your species ever make it off planet?" Clicks chittered, his translator making his voice sound like a caffeinated robot having an existential crisis. "Did you just guess your way to space travel?" "Pretty much," Jake replied cheerfully. "Lots of explosions. Some of them were even intentional." Commander Thrakus, a blue-skinned Altarian with enough military decorations to stock a small museum, called for attention. "Cadets, in 30 minutes you will be dropped on Survival World designation, Nightmare. You have 72 hours to reach the extraction point. Use of emergency beacons results in immediate failure and academic probation." Vexstar's biosuit was already running preliminary scans and displaying holographic maps. "My environmental systems show optimal route calculation in progress. This will be disappointingly easy." "Indeed." Zara's voice rang like wind chimes in a hurricane. "My crystalline matrix has downloaded all geological and meteorological data for this sector. I predict completion in 47.3 hours. Jake unzipped his backpack and pulled out what appeared to be an actual paper map. The aliens fell silent, staring at the primitive document like he'd just produced a stone tablet. "Is that physical information storage?" Mumblix wheezed through his breathing apparatus. "Paper," Jake confirmed. "Made from dead trees. We used to kill entire forests just to write grocery lists." "Barbaric," Vexstar muttered, though he couldn't seem to look away from the map. "Oh, it gets worse," Jake said, folding the map with practiced ease. "This backpack doesn't even have Wi-Fi." The collective gasp was audible even through various alien breathing apparatus. The drop pods hit the surface of Nightmare with all the grace of falling meteors, which Jake supposed was basically what they were. He rolled out of his pod and immediately felt the electromagnetic pulse wash over the landing zone like an invisible tidal wave. "Haha, what the hell was that?" Vexstar's voice crackled through the comm system, already showing signs of interference. Jake pulled out an honest-to-goodness compass from his backpack pocket. The needle spun wildly for a moment before settling on magnetic north. "Electromagnetic storm," he announced. "Probably ionospheric interference from the binary star system. Should clear up in a few days." "A few days?" Zora's crystalline form was flickering like a broken hologram. "My internal navigation systems are completely scrambled." "Mine too." Clicks buzzed frantically, his wings beating erratically as his flight stabilizers failed. "How are we supposed to navigate without GPS positioning?" Jake held up his compass. "With one of these, invented sometime around 200 BC, still works great." The collective silence was deafening. "You mean," Mumblix wheezed slowly, "you're going to navigate using a piece of metal that points north?" "Revolutionary concept, I know." Jake shouldered his backpack and consulted his paper map. "See, the thing about magnetic compasses is they work by detecting the planet's magnetic field. No satellites required, no computer processing, no power source, except basic magnetism. It's almost like our ancestors weren't complete idiots." Vexstar was frantically tapping his biosuit controls, getting nothing but error messages. "This is impossible. My environmental systems require constant data streaming. How am I supposed to know if the air is breathable?" Jake took a deep breath through his nose. "Seems fine to me. No sulfur smell, oxygen levels feel normal, humidity's a bit high but manageable." He noticed their stares. "Oh right, you probably don't have functioning noses anymore, too primitive." "I have olfactory sensors," Clicks protested. "Are they working?" A pause. No. Weird. Jake started walking in what his compass indicated was northeast, toward the extraction point marked on his grandfather's hand-annotated map. Maybe evolution had a point with the whole backup biological systems thing. Behind him, the aliens were beginning to panic as their various technological marvels continued failing. Climate control suits sparked and died. Holographic displays flickered out. Navigation systems spun uselessly. "How are you not concerned about this?" Zara demanded, her crystalline matrix crackling with static. Jake pulled out a rolled-up poncho from his backpack as the first drops of rain began falling. "Oh, I'm concerned. This storm system looks nasty. We've got about 6 hours of daylight left, and I'm pretty sure I just saw something with too many teeth watching us from those trees." "Then why aren't you panicking?" Jake snapped the poncho over his head and shoulders. "Because panic is just fear without a plan. Grandpa Martinez taught me that. He also taught me to always pack extra socks and never trust technology that can't function when wet." Thunder rumbled overhead, and the electromagnetic pulse intensified. One by one, the aliens' remaining systems shut down completely. "So," Jake called over the rising wind, "anyone want to learn how to read a barometer? Because this storm's going to get a lot worse before it gets better." The rain had been falling for 6 hours straight, turning the alien landscape into what Jake generously described as a mud wrestling arena designed by sadists. His classmates huddled miserably under whatever inadequate shelter their now useless equipment could provide, which was roughly equivalent to hiding under a napkin during a hurricane. "This is intolerable," Vexstar hissed, his biosuit's climate control having died spectacularly around hour 2. "My scales are designed for arid environments. This moisture will cause fungal infections." Jake, meanwhile, had constructed what appeared to be a functional shelter, using nothing but his poncho, some rope from his backpack, and a few strategically bent tree branches. He was currently engaged in an activity that was causing his alien classmates to question everything they thought they knew about human biology. "Is he eating that?" Zara whispered, her crystalline form refracting the dim light as she stared in horrified fascination. There was a handful of what looked like weeds and berries that Jake had casually plucked from the ground. He chewed thoughtfully, occasionally spitting out seeds. "Tastes like bitter lettuce with a hint of something that might kill me," Jake announced cheerfully. "But the survival guide says it's probably edible for humans, keyword being probably. You're consuming unidentified plant matter based on probability." Clake's compound eyes were practically bulging out of his skull. Without running toxicology scans? Without chemical analysis? Without even a basic spectral reading? Jake shrugged. "My great-great-grandfather ate grass soup during the siege of Leningrad and lived to be 92. Humans have this weird ability to survive on stuff that would kill most sensible species." He popped another berry into his mouth. "We're basically biological garbage disposals with anxiety disorders." Mumblix made a sound that his translator rendered as disgusted whimpering. "But what if it's poisonous?" "Then I'll probably throw up for a while and feel terrible," Jake replied matter-of-factly. "But I won't die. Human stomachs are like chemical weapons factories. We can process stuff that would dissolve most aliens from the inside out. Ever heard of something called hot sauce?" The aliens collectively shuddered. Things got even weirder when Jake decided it was time to sleep. While his classmates complained bitterly about the cold, the wet, the uncomfortable terrain, and the complete inadequacy of their technological comfort systems, Jake simply rolled out what appeared to be a thin blanket and lay down on a pile of leaves. "You cannot possibly be comfortable," Zara observed, her voice tinkling with disbelief. "The ground temperature is 42 degrees Fahrenheit. You're lying on decomposing organic matter. There are at least 17 different species of biting insects in the immediate vicinity." Jake yawned. "Yeah, it's not great, but I've slept on worse. Bus station floors, airport benches. That one time I had to sleep standing up in a Tokyo subway car for 6 hours. He adjusted his backpack to use as a pillow. "Humans can sleep anywhere. It's like a superpower, except completely useless in modern society." "How is that possible?" Vexstar demanded. "Your spine will be completely misaligned, your muscles will cramp, your immune system will be compromised by exposure." "Probably," Jake agreed, closing his eyes. "But I'll be rested enough to function tomorrow, which is more than I can say for you guys. Evolution designed humans to be persistence hunters. We don't need to be fast or strong or comfortable. We just need to keep going when everything else gives up." The aliens watched in stunned silence as Jake's breathing evened out and he fell asleep within minutes, apparently unbothered by the rain, the cold, the uncomfortable ground, or the strange howling noises coming from the forest. "This is impossible," Click muttered. "No sentient species should be able to function under these conditions." "Yeah, well," Jake's voice drifted up from his improvised bed. "That's why we're called the crazy ones in most galactic databases. We're the species that looked at a ball of fire 93 million miles away and said, 'I bet we could harness that.' We're the ones who invented recreational skydiving and deep-sea diving and something called parkour, which is basically the art of falling with style." He shifted slightly, getting comfortable on his pile of leaves. "The universe is a hostile, terrifying place designed to kill everything in it. Most species evolved to avoid danger. Humans evolved to look danger in the eye and ask if it comes in different flavors." A particularly loud howl echoed through the forest, and all the aliens flinched. Jake didn't even open his eyes. "That's either a very large predator, or someone's really upset about the weather," he murmured. "Either way, nothing I can do about it tonight except get some sleep." Within minutes, he was snoring softly, leaving his alien classmates to contemplate the terrifying realization that humans might just be the most adaptable species in the galaxy. And they were only 12 hours into the test. Hour 18 brought what Jake's grandfather would have called a real shitstorm, though Jake was fairly certain Grandpa Martinez had never faced a Category 5 electromagnetic hurricane on an alien deathworld. The storm that had been merely unpleasant the night before had evolved into something that seemed personally offended by the existence of life itself. "My biosuit is completely dead," Vextar announced, his voice barely audible over the howling wind. The 7-foot reptilian was shivering so violently that his scales were chattering like castanets. "Internal temperature regulation has failed. My species enters hibernation mode at temperatures below 60 degrees Fahrenheit." "Well, that's inconvenient," Jake shouted back, consulting what appeared to be an actual paper weather chart from his backpack. He had to hold it down with both hands to keep it from becoming an impromptu kite. "Because according to this barometric pressure reading, we're looking at temperatures dropping into the 30s over the next few hours." Clix had given up trying to fly entirely. His navigation system so scrambled he'd been flying in circles for the past hour before crash landing in what he'd later described as the least dignified moment of my academic career. His compound eyes were twitching with what Jake assumed was the insectoid equivalent of a nervous breakdown. "How are you reading weather patterns from a piece of paper?" Clix chittered desperately. Jake tapped the barometer attached to his compass. "Atmospheric pressure. When it drops this fast, you're looking at a major storm system. The wind pattern suggests a spiral formation, probably centered about 15 kilometers north of here." He squinted at the increasingly hostile sky. "This isn't just weather anymore. This is the planet trying to kill us." "My crystalline matrix is fracturing from the electromagnetic interference," Zara announced, her normally pristine form now crackling with static discharge. "I cannot maintain structural integrity much longer." Mumblix wasn't even talking anymore, just making small whimpering noises through his breathing apparatus, which had been making increasingly concerning grinding sounds for the past hour. Jake looked around at his classmates, all of whom were in various stages of technological and biological failure, and made a decision that would have made his grandfather proud, and his teachers deeply concerned. "Right," he announced, unzipping his backpack with the kind of authority usually reserved for military commanders and people who actually knew what they were doing. "Change of plans. We're not making it to the extraction point in this weather. We need shelter, we need heat, and we need it now." From the depths of his seemingly magical backpack, Jake began producing items that his alien classmates had previously dismissed as quaint relics. A compass that actually pointed north, a fire starter that didn't require batteries, emergency rations wrapped in something called mylar that reflected heat, a first aid kit containing actual bandages instead of nanobotic healing systems, and rope. Lots and lots of rope. "Is that cordage made from plant fibers?" Vextar asked weakly, his reptilian brain struggling to process the concept. "Hemp rope," Jake confirmed, already identifying suitable anchor points for an emergency shelter. "Tensile strength of about 20,000 pounds. Been using it for centuries. Never needs a software update." The wind picked up to truly biblical proportions, and that's when things went from bad to, "Oh God, we're all going to die on an alien world and our parents will never find the bodies." "Jake," Zara's voice cracked with static and genuine panic. "Clix is down. His wing membranes are torn." Jake looked over to see the insectoid cadet crumpled against a rock formation, his delicate wings shredded by debris carried on the wind. Without his flight systems, Clix was essentially a very intelligent bug with no way to escape ground-based predators. "Mumblix's breathing apparatus just failed," Vexstock called out, his voice already showing the effects of dropping body temperature. He's going into respiratory distress. And that's when Jake Martinez, descendant of soldiers and carriers of battered backpacks, did something that would be talked about in Galactic Survival Academy classes for the next 50 years. He ran toward the danger instead of away from it. Vex, grab Clicks! Zara, help Mumblix! We're moving to that cave formation, now! Jake's voice cut through the storm with the kind of authority that comes from generations of humans who'd survived impossible situations through sheer bloody-mindedness. Are you insane? Vexstar hissed. We can barely move in this weather. Yeah, well, staying here means we die slowly instead of quickly, Jake shot back, already rigging a safety line from his seemingly endless supply of rope. And I've got news for you. Humans don't do dying quietly. We go down swinging, usually while complaining loudly about the unfairness of it all. He tied one end of the rope around his waist and began threading it through improvised anchor points. Everyone grabs the rope. Nobody lets go. We move together, or we die together. And frankly, I'm way too stubborn to die on day 2 of a survival test. The aliens, faced with the choice between trusting their malfunctioning technology or following the human with the magical mystery backpack, made what was probably the smartest decision of their academic careers. They grabbed the rope. This is madness, Zara whispered, her crystalline form barely holding together as electromagnetic pulses wreaked havoc on her matrix. Yeah, Jake agreed cheerfully, shouldering his backpack and preparing to lead a group of technologically dependent aliens across a hostile landscape in hurricane-force winds, using nothing but rope, determination, and the kind of stubborn human optimism that had gotten their species off a small blue planet in the first place. But it's the fun kind of madness. How is this fun? Vexstar demanded. Jake grinned, and for a moment his alien classmates caught a glimpse of something that had allowed humans to colonize half the galaxy, despite being soft, slow, and completely lacking in natural weapons. Because, Jake said, we're still alive to complain about it. The cave Jake had spotted turned out to be less cozy shelter and more barely adequate hole in the rock that smells like something died in it. But after 20 minutes of fighting hurricane-force winds while dragging 4 aliens across hostile terrain, it looked like the Ritz-Carlton. Is that actual fire? Vexstar whispered in amazement as Jake coaxed flames from what appeared to be a small metal device and some shredded paper from his notebook. Magnesium fire starter, Jake explained, feeding small twigs to the growing flame. Grandpa Martinez swore by them. Burns at about 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, works when wet, and doesn't require a nuclear reactor to operate. He glanced around at his classmates, who were staring at the fire like it was some kind of mystical phenomenon. You guys do know how fire works, right? Theoretically, Clicks chittered weakly, his torn wing membranes wrapped in actual cloth bandages from Jake's first aid kit. But most civilized species moved past combustion-based heating millennia ago. Yeah, well, civilized doesn't keep you warm when your fancy heating systems fail, Jake replied, carefully positioning rocks around the fire to reflect heat back into the cave. Fire is basically controlled destruction that gives off heat and light. Humans figured this out about 1 million years ago, and we've been setting things on fire ever since. It's kind of our thing. Mumblix was breathing easier now, his respiratory distress eased by the warmth and by breathing apparatus repairs that involved actual tape and wire from Jake's seemingly bottomless backpack. Your first aid techniques are primitive but effective, he wheezed. Primitive works when advanced doesn't, Jake said, checking the bandage on Click's wing. Grandpa Martinez served in 3 different wars and 2 colonial conflicts. You know what saved more lives than advanced medical technology? Clean bandages, antibiotics, and not giving up on people. He pulled out what looked like a small, weathered notebook and began sketching a rough map of their situation. Okay, strategic assessment time. We're approximately 12 kilometers from the extraction point, but the storm system is moving southeast, which means we'd be walking directly into it. Terrain maps show a river system about 3 kilometers north that should provide some natural windbreak. Zara's fractured crystalline form was slowly stabilizing near the fire's warmth. How are you calculating all of this without computer assistance? Jake tapped his temple. Pattern recognition, basic trigonometry, and what Grandpa called educated guessing backed up by common sense. He showed them the notebook, filled with hand-drawn maps, weather notations, and what appeared to be tactical diagrams. He kept field notes during the Centauri campaign, wrote down everything he learned about survival, leadership, and how to keep people alive when everything goes wrong. This is his notebook? Vexstar asked, his scales warming to a healthier color as his body temperature stabilized. All of 'em. He gave it to me before he died. along with the backpack and some advice about how the universe likes to kill things, but humans are too stubborn to stay dead. Jake flipped through pages of cramped handwriting, tactical sketches, and what looked like poetry. He said that technology fails, but knowledge passed down through generations stays with you. Clix leaned in closer, his compound eyes scanning the pages with growing fascination. These tactical formations, they're designed for coordinating different species with different capabilities. Grandpa served in the Mixed Species Colonial Defense Force, Jake explained. Humans, Altarians, vegan engineers, even some crystalline core units. He learned that every species has strengths and weaknesses. The trick is making the strengths cover the weaknesses. Jake looked around at his classmates, all of whom were listening with the kind of attention usually reserved for life-threatening situations, which, to be fair, this was. Vex, your species has enhanced strength and thermal vision, right? Even without your biosuit. Yes, but how did you... Zariah, your crystalline structure can process electromagnetic frequencies even when your tech is down. Basic functions, yes, but... Clix, you can detect air current patterns and atmospheric pressure changes through your wing membranes? Even damaged ones can sense basic atmospheric data, Clix admitted. And Mumblix, your species has enhanced hearing and can detect subsonic vibrations? Mumblix nodded slowly. Jake grinned, and it was the kind of grin that had preceded humanity's most spectacularly successful disasters. Then we don't need technology. We need teamwork. He started sketching a new tactical formation in his notebook. Vex, your point guard. Your thermal vision can spot obstacles and potential threats through the storm. Zara, you're our communications hub. Your EM sensitivity can help us navigate around the worst of the electrical activity. Clix, even with damaged wings, you can read wind patterns and help us find the path of least resistance. Mumblix, your early warning. Anything moving out there, you'll hear it coming. And what about you? Zara asked. Jake shouldered his grandfather's backpack and checked his compass. I'm doing what humans do best. I'm keeping everyone together, making sure nobody gets left behind, and being too stubborn to admit when we're probably all going to die. That's your contribution, Vexstar asked. Stubbornness? Don't underestimate stubbornness, Jake replied seriously. It got humanity from flinging rocks at mammoths to building starships in about 10,000 years. When the universe says, this is impossible, humans say, hold my beer and watch this. The storm howled outside their cave, but for the first time since the test began, none of them were panicking. They had fire, they had shelter, they had a plan, and they had something that no amount of advanced technology could provide. They had a human who refused to give up, armed with the accumulated wisdom of generations who had survived impossible odds through sheer determination and the radical idea that maybe, just maybe, the old ways worked, because they had to. So, Jake said, consulting his grandfather's compass and weather notes, who's ready to show this planet that it picked the wrong species to mess with? The aliens looked at each other, then at the human with his battered backpack in unshakable confidence. Let's go make Grandpa Martinez proud, Vexstar said. And for the first time since landing on Nightmare, Jake actually believed they might make it out alive. The rescue shuttles found them 18 hours ahead of schedule, camped beside the extraction point with a signal fire that could probably be seen from orbit. Jake was teaching Vexstar how to tie a proper bowline knot while Zara practiced reading his grandfather's compass. Clix was taking notes on wind pattern recognition, and Mumblix was carefully copying Jake's fire-starting technique into his own notebook. This is impossible, Commander Thrakis announced, his blue skin flushing darker with confusion as he reviewed the sensor data. The electromagnetic storm should have disabled all navigation systems. How did you reach the extraction point early? Jake looked up from where he was showing his classmates how to identify edible plants. We used the revolutionary technique of walking in the right direction while not dying. But your equipment worked perfectly, Jake interrupted, patting his grandfather's backpack. Turns out analog technology has this weird property where it keeps functioning even when the universe is having a bad day. The rescue team's medical scanners were going crazy trying to figure out how 5 cadets had not only survived the worst electromagnetic storm in the planet's recorded history, but had actually thrived. Clix's wing repairs were holding perfectly despite being made from cloth and medical tape. Vexstar's hypothermia had been completely reversed using nothing but fire and shared body heat. Everyone was well fed, properly hydrated, and showing signs of what the scanners could only classify as improved teamwork efficiency. Cadet Martinez, Commander Thrakis said slowly, your psychological profile, indicated antisocial tendencies and difficulty with group cooperation. Well, Jake said, helping Mumblix pack up the last of their improvised camp. Turns out I cooperate just fine when everyone stops trying to prove how superior their technology is and starts focusing on not dying horribly. Vexstar stepped forward, his scales rippling with what Jake had learned was the Zephyrian equivalent of embarrassment. Commander, I need to submit a correction to my pre-test assessment of Cadet Martinez. I stated that his equipment was primitive and inadequate. Vexstar glanced at Jake's backpack with something approaching reverence. I was wrong. His equipment was proven and reliable. It was our technology that was inadequate. Zara's crystalline form chimed in agreement. My analysis concluded that human survival methods were inefficient. This was incorrect. Human methods are robust precisely because they account for system failures that more advanced species ignore. Plaix buzzed his wings experimentally, testing Jake's repairs. I recommended that humans should not be admitted to advanced survival programs due to their reliance on outdated techniques. His compound eyes focused on Jake. I now recommend that human techniques should be mandatory curriculum for all advanced survival programs. Commander Thrakus looked between the cadets and his sensor readings, clearly trying to process information that didn't fit any known paradigm. Cadet Martinez, how do you explain your group's exceptional performance under impossible conditions? Jake shouldered his grandfather's backpack and checked his compass one final time before closing it. Simple. Everyone else prepared for the test they expected to take. I prepared for the test the universe actually gave us. He looked around at his former tormentors, now genuinely listening to every word he said. See, the thing about the universe is that it doesn't care about your technological superiority, or your advanced degrees, or your perfectly calculated survival algorithms. The universe just wants to kill you, and it's really good at finding creative ways to do it. Jake patted his backpack fondly. But humans have been dying in creative and horrible ways for millennia. And every generation that survived long enough to reproduce passed down a little bit more knowledge about how to keep breathing when everything goes wrong. This backpack isn't just survival gear, it's accumulated wisdom from people who faced impossible odds and lived to complain about it. And the moral of the story? Commander Thrakus asked. Jake grinned, the same stubborn grin that had gotten humanity through ice ages, plagues, wars, and the occasional alien invasion. Sometimes the old ways work best, especially when the new ways fail spectacularly. And when in doubt, pack extra rope, and never underestimate the power of human stubbornness. As they boarded the rescue shuttle, Zara turned to Jake with a question that had been bothering her since the storm. Jake, what would you have done if we hadn't made it? If the storm had been too much, or if someone had been seriously injured? Jake was quiet for a moment, then pulled out his grandfather's notebook and showed them the last entry, written in faded ink on yellowed paper. Sometimes you lose people. Sometimes the universe wins, but you never give up. You never leave anyone behind, and you never stop fighting until the very last breath. Because that's what it means to be human. We don't survive because we're the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced. We survive because we refuse to quit. He closed the notebook and tucked it back into his backpack. I would have kept trying until we all made it out, or until there was nobody left to try. The shuttle lifted off, carrying 5 cadets who had learned that sometimes the most advanced technology in the universe is the refusal to give up, combined with a really good backpack and the accumulated wisdom of stubborn ancestors. And in the cargo bay, Jake's grandfather's backpack sat quietly, its worn leather straps and faded canvas holding secrets that no computer could calculate. The knowledge that survival isn't about having the best equipment, but about having the courage to keep going when all the equipment fails. Class dismissed.